Today, we're jumping into a story where something as simple as picking some grain on a Saturday spirals into a full-blown life-or-death showdown. It's a story that asks a really tough question. What do you do when a sacred rule seems to go head-to-head with a basic human need? Let's get into it. So here's the scene from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field. It's the Sabbath, the day of rest. And as they're walking, the disciples start plucking heads of grain to eat. Now, to you and me, that sounds pretty harmless, but to the religious authorities who were watching, oh, that was a huge problem. That wasn't just grabbing a snack. In their book, that was work. And on the Sabbath, work was absolutely forbidden.
Okay, so yeah, technically they were breaking a rule. No one's debating that. But here's the twist Jesus throws in. He argues that they were actually honoring the real purpose behind the rule. And right there, that sets up this incredible clash between following the letter of the law and following its spirit.
So why was this such a huge deal? I mean, it's just a little bit of grain, right? Well, to really get why the Pharisees were so outraged, we need to understand what the Sabbath meant to them. It wasn't just a day off.
You have to remember, after the Jewish people returned from exile in Babylon, they were really focused on preserving their unique identity in a world full of foreign influences. So certain practices, like circumcision and, you guessed it, observing the Sabbath, became these really powerful signs that set them apart. The Sabbath was a weekly reminder of who they were and their special covenant with God.
So to make sure nobody even accidentally broke this sacred law, the scribes and Pharisees basically built a fence of rules around it. They created this incredibly detailed legal code that defined exactly what counted as work. Things like how far you could walk, or in this case plucking grain, which they saw as a form of harvesting, were totally forbidden. The intention was good, to protect a holy principle, but the result was a very rigid, complex system.
But was this huge, complicated rulebook really the point of the Sabbath from the very beginning? Jesus pushes back on this idea by going back to the scriptures, back to the source, to uncover a much deeper, more life-giving purpose for the day.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The Old Testament actually gives two different foundations for the Sabbath. In Exodus, it's about creation. It's about honoring God the Creator who rested on the seventh day. But then in Deuteronomy, the focus shifts to liberation. It's a command to remember being slaves in Egypt and to give that same gift of rest to everyone, your servants, foreigners, even your animals. So the original principle is rooted in both honoring God and promoting human dignity and justice. So with that background in mind, Jesus doesn't just try to find a loophole in the rules. He completely reframes the entire conversation. And he does it by using the Pharisees' own playbook, the scriptures, to make his point. His first move is to bring up this famous story about King David. David and his men were on the run, they were starving, and he went to the holy tabernacle and ate the sacred bread that was technically only for priests. And was he condemned for it? Nope. Why not? Because a fundamental human need, the need to survive, took priority over a religious rule. The point was clear. Life is more important than ritual. And that story perfectly sets up his main event. This absolutely revolutionary statement. He just flips the whole hierarchy upside down. The rules, even the really important sacred ones, are meant to serve humanity. People don't exist just to be servants to the rules. I mean, that one sentence changes everything about the debate. So what Jesus is doing here is laying out what you could call the Sabbath principle. The day isn't meant to be about a long list of things you can't do. It's about a positive vision. It's meant to be a day that brings freedom, restoration, and dignity to people's lives, just like it was supposed to for the freed slaves. And then, just when you think he's made his point, he delivers the final knockout. He declares that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. Now that is an incredible claim. He's essentially saying, I have the ultimate authority to tell you what this law truly means. This was a direct challenge, not just to their rules, but to their entire religious authority. And this was not just some academic disagreement. The conflict immediately explodes. It moves from a debate in a field to a confrontation in the synagogue, where the stakes suddenly become life and death. So they're in the synagogue, and there's a man there with a withered hand. You can just feel the tension in the air. Everyone is watching Jesus. And he doesn't just heal the man right away. First, he poses this question that puts his opponents in an impossible position. He forces them to choose right then and there. Is the Sabbath about doing good and saving a life, or is it about doing nothing and letting someone suffer?
And what do? They say nothing. Complete silence. The scripture says their hearts were hardened. Think about it. If they admit it's lawful to do good, their whole rigid system of rules starts to look shaky. They were so committed to defending the system that they couldn't even state a simple, compassionate truth. Their ideology had trapped them.
Seeing their stubborn silence, Jesus just goes ahead and heals the man's hand. And for the Pharisees, that is the last straw. He has publicly humiliated them and undermined their authority. So they walk straight out and do the unthinkable. They meet up with the Herodians, a political faction they hated, and they start to form an alliance. Their one common goal? To figure out how to destroy Jesus. A simple act of healing has now made him a target.
This incredible escalation really shows us what's truly at stake in this whole debate, and it leaves us wrestling with a really deep question about what faith and obedience are all about.
So what does it actually mean to honor the Sabbath according to this story? Well, it's clearly not just about not doing stuff. It's an active thing. It's about actively doing good. It's about choosing to heal, to restore dignity, to save a life, even if it means breaking a rule. It's about plugging into God's life-giving purpose for the world. In the end, this story gives us two starkly different paths. There's the path of the rule, which, when taken to an extreme, leads to silence in the face of suffering. It leads to inaction and even a willingness to destroy a life just to protect a system. But then there's the path of the principle. And that path leads to action, to healing, and to life, even if it means risking your own.
And that really leaves us with the core challenge of this whole explainer. It's a question that stretches way beyond this ancient story and into our world today. In our own lives, in our jobs, in our societies, when does our dedication to following a rule start to betray the very reason that rule was created? It's the ultimate question of choosing between the system and the very people that system was designed to serve.